Welcome to the monthly vinyl voyage. In September 2022, I started an experiment, building myself a new music collection from scratch, at a rate of no more than one album a month. 2 years later, it's formed 24 great albums, and I'm taking a bit of time to look at each of these purchases, to learn more about it, to reflect on what it means to me, and to digress onto any side notes that I find interesting. Thanks for joining me today. My record of the month from January 2024, album number 16 in my music collection, and it's Lungs, the debut album from Florence and the Machine, released in July 2009. The principals in Florence and the Machine are Florence Welsh and Isabella Summers. Florence is the face and voice of the group. She's a remarkable artist and one of the biggest voices in British indie music. In the weighty opinion of Lady Gaga, Florence has, quote, the greatest voice in the world. It's a voice which she began to hone as a child, singing in a small bedroom of her family home in Camberwell. Camberwell at the time had a big punk scene, and Florence went to ska gigs with her parents, listened to Dookie, and identified with the teenage skater crowd at her school. Aged 13, Florence lost her maternal grandmother, who committed suicide, and Florence responded to this and other trauma in her life by retreating back into herself, inventing fantasy worlds and warbling in her room. In 2004, Florence began writing music with her younger sister's babysitter, Isabella Summers, who I will talk more about. In 2006, Florence dropped out of Camberwell Art College to pursue music full-time, playing in London's bars and clubs with Isabella. Florence has reflected that in her teens and early 20s, she enjoyed hanging out with a lot of the Camberwell punk bands, who had a whole swashbuckling drunk pirate gothic scene. The band got a booking at the 2008 South by Southwest Music Festival in Texas. By all accounts, it's a bit of a drunken fiasco. When they eventually do perform, Florence is accompanied just by her guitarist, and she had a big drum that she hits with a stick. She's got a bit of gold glitter on her face, but that's it. There's no theatrics at all. But as she starts singing, everyone is just blown away by her voice. She ends the gig by leaping into an ornamental pond. Because, or despite of this showcase, she meets MGMT, who bring Florence and the Machine on tour as one of their opening acts, and this helps kick off the band's first major run of shows. And by November 2008, they've signed a recording contract with Island Records. In 2009, they released their debut album, Lungs, which received critical acclaim and commercial success. The band won the Critics' Choice Awards at the Brit Awards that year, further cementing their place in the music industry. Their unique blend of indie rock, baroque pop and art rock, combined with Florence's powerful vocals and theatrical stage presence, quickly made them a favourite amongst fans and critics. Florence's decision to pursue music full-time certainly paid off. It probably helped that the punk and indie music scene of London in the 2010s had recently delivered Adele and Mumford & Sons, both previous Brit Award nominees and winners. But even with that, the rapid pace of the band's growth was a really rare thing. In the course of 2 years, the group went from being virtually unknown playing London's pubs to selling out the Hammersmith Apollo, securing a #1 album and winning Brit Awards. By 2010, the band is headlining Glastonbury, and Florence has become a Gucci-wearing force of nature. She's become this star, the scale of which we really hadn't seen for a while. Someone from the UK who has already made an impression on the American market, performing The Dog Days Are Over at the MTV Video Music Awards. 2024 is the 15th anniversary of this album, and to celebrate, Florence and the Machine were invited to play a one-off orchestral gig at London's Royal Albert Hall. Called Symphony of Lungs, this was part of the BBC Proms, and they didn't disappoint. The performance was described as a whirlwind of nostalgia, notable for Welsh's stage presence and the balance between high drama and delicate flow. Songs like Blinding and Hurricane Drunk were exceptional live renditions. For most singers, a Royal Albert Hall gig would probably be the highlight of the year, but in August, Florence made a surprise appearance during Taylor Swift's concert in London. Florence and Taylor recorded the song Florida, for Taylor's most recent album, The Tortured Poets Department, and the London concert was the first time the pair had performed it live. Whilst Florence is grabbing all the headlines, I just want to loop back and mention Isabella Summers. Personally, I think Isabella is undercredited for her role in the band's success. Isabella's talent as a producer, arranger and songwriter has been crucial in shaping the sonic world that Florence and the Machine inhabit. While Florence may lead with her voice and vision, Isabella helps turn that vision into a polished, cohesive musical experience. Her understated, collaborative approach contrasts with Florence's bold, public-facing persona, but the two work symbiotically. And whilst the songwriting partnership with Florence has received Grammy nominations, Isabella's recent solo work as a TV composer is equally impressive. The score she wrote for the Little Fires Everywhere TV series earned another industry nod at the Emmys. I bought this record, new and sealed from Revolution Records in January 2024. It isn't a special edition of any sort. In fact, it was incredibly hard to figure out which pressing it is exactly. From what I can tell, I have a 2023 repress by MPO, which is identical to the original 2009 issue, except for the runout. Interestingly, Symphony of Lungs, recorded at the BBC Proms, is expected to be released on the 14th of March next year, 2025, and I will definitely be keeping an eye out for that. Lungs is an album I genuinely love all of, but there are caveats. Firstly, this is the only album by Florence and the Machine that I love. And secondly, I wasn't immediately comfortable with loving it. I love this whole album, and I was really excited for the release of their second album, Ceremonials, but I didn't love it. Growing up in Camberwell, in the kind of punk scene, Florence was always attracted to morbid and gothic fantasy. In her teens and early 20s, when she was hanging out a lot with the Camberwell Art College crowd, that is where songs like Kiss with a Fist came from. It was of a particular time, very much reminding her of being 17 or 18. And this first album captures that moment in time. But the band knew quite quickly that they wanted to move beyond or evolve from that genre. Talking about Ceremonials, Florence said, "I think I'm really glad that I got to do a second album, because I had so many ideas on the first, and because it was a first record, you're basically sort of testing the water and testing your abilities and what kind of music you want to make." Talking more about Ceremonials, she says, "And so for this one, I felt I had much more of a clear idea what kind of a sound it was. It was always an easier process because I had all these ideas of what I wanted to do, and I kind of described this sound to Isa, this deep bass choral kind of electronic drum pattern thing." Now, I do think all of their albums are good, but they are a conscious evolution of their sound, moving them away from the raw, unfiltered intensity that defined their debut album. Maybe I just want to listen to the angry teenager. As I also said, I wasn't immediately comfortable loving this album. Kiss with a Fist was the very first single released and was exceptionally hard-hitting. The rich vocals carry an emotional weight that feels larger than life, yet deeply personal. For a long time, I took the lyrics for Kiss with a Fist literally, which made me uncomfortable because of the imagery of violence seemed problematic. It felt like the song was glorifying a toxic relationship. Even so, I couldn't help but love the song, even if I felt uncomfortable doing so. Eventually I learned about the metaphorical intent behind the song, and that it's not about the physical violence at all. Instead, it's using extreme and hyperbolic imagery to represent the emotional intensity and conflict in a tumultuous relationship. The actions described in the song symbolise the push and pull between partners and the raw emotions that come with love and conflict. Since the violence is a metaphor for the intense, sometimes destructive emotions that people can experience in a relationship, it's all about the highs and lows rather than actual harm. This shift in perspective helped me appreciate the song for its creativity and emotional complexity. And as a result, it's honestly a feeling of relief that I can have this as pride of place in my collection, not as a guilty listen. One more strange point I want to mention is that there was some confusion over the lungs featured on the album cover. They were prosthetic, but designed to look realistic, fitting in the album's aesthetic. But on the CD, which is what most of us bought in 2009, the album art was so small that they just looked real. And I know a few people were offended by that, thinking that they were real animal lungs. Released in July 2009, Lungs debuted at number 2 on the UK album charts, just behind Michael Jackson's The Essential Michael Jackson. However, the album didn't peak at number 1 until January 2010, 6 months after its initial release. The album spent 65 consecutive weeks in the top 40 of the UK album chart and remained in the chart for an impressive 28 months, more than 2 years in total, showcasing its immense staying power and popularity over time. It sold over 1 million copies here in the UK and became one of the best-selling albums of 2009 and 2010. The album was certified 5x Platinum by the BPI. Lungs received several award nominations and won British Album of the Year at the 2010 Brit Awards. The success of Lungs established Florence and the Machine as a major force in indie music and helped shape the sound of British alternative pop in the 2010s. The band became known for their energetic live performances and visually stunning music videos, which complemented their grandiose style. So what's to love on this album? Kiss with a Fist is an early single with more raw punk-like edge. There's Dog Days Are Over, one of their biggest hits, known for its upbeat energy and emotional intensity. Rabbit Heart is a standout track with a grand orchestral and lush sound, which grew in the later albums. And You've Got the Love, which is a fantastic cover and became one of the band's sort of signature songs, easily eclipsing the original. Overall, this album explores emotional highs and lows, often focusing on themes of love, heartbreak, longing and even transcendence. The lyrics often draw from folklore and mythology, giving the music a magical and otherworldly quality. I'm less of a fan of the other albums, but given the ability to pull a song forward in time, I would choose Ship to Wreck from their third album, How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful, released in 2015. It's a standout track, combining Florence's ethereal voice with upbeat, driving rhythms and introspective lyrics. Ship to Wreck explores the idea of self-sabotage and destructive behaviour. Florence has explained that the song reflects the emotional turmoil of creating something only to watch it fall apart due to one's own actions, which is something she has admitted struggling with. The lyrics evoke a sense of internal conflict, asking, did I drink too much? Am I losing touch? Did I build this ship to wreck? The song has an energetic, upbeat tempo and a bright, jangly guitar riff, giving it a slightly rock-influenced sound. The song was produced by Marcus Draves, who also worked on the album as a whole, Dravs is known for his work with artists like Arcade Fire and Coldplay, and his production brought a slightly more stripped down, guitar-based sound to the album, contrasting with the lush orchestral arrangements of Lungs and Ceremonials. Ship to Wreck received critical acclaim for its emotional depth and infectious sound. Many praised the song's ability to blend melancholy with euphoria, capturing both Florence's personal struggles and the expansive sound that Florence and the Machine are known for. It was nominated for Best Rock Performance at the 2016 Grammy Awards, further solidifying Florence and the Machine's crossover appeal between indie, rock and pop. Well, that was album 16 for January 2024, Florence and the Machine, Lungs. I'm sure I've made mistakes in my research and presentation. We're only human. But thank you for listening.